In ancient Egypt, marriage was often arranged for the sake of community stability and personal advancement. However, contrary to the idea that only practical considerations governed marriages, evidence suggests that romantic love held a significant place in the hearts of ancient Egyptians, much like it does today. Romantic love found expression in poetry, particularly during the New Kingdom, 1570 to 1069 BCE, where verses celebrated the virtues and qualities of lovers or spouses. An example of this romantic sentiment can be seen in the Chester Beatty Papyrus I, dating back to around 1200 BCE. Although the speaker refers to his beloved as his sister, it's important to note that this wasn't a literal sibling but rather a common endearment. In ancient Egyptian culture, women were often addressed as sisters, older women as mothers, men of the same age as brothers, and older men as fathers. In this papyrus, the speaker not only extols the beauty of his beloved but also captures the prevailing Egyptian standard of feminine attractiveness during that era. He describes his beloved in poetic detail. "My sister is unique, no one can rival her, for she is the most beautiful woman alive. Look, she is like Sirius, which marks the beginning of a good year. She radiates perfection and glows with health. The glance of her eye is gorgeous. Her lips speak sweetly, and not one word too many. Long-necked and milky-breasted she is, her hair the color of pure lapis. Gold is nothing compared to her arms, and her fingers are like lotus flowers. Her buttocks are full but her waist is narrow. As for her thighs, they only add to her beauty." Lewis, 203. Despite the societal context where males were often considered dominant and most literary works were authored by male scribes, women in ancient Egypt enjoyed a relatively equal status with men. This equality is rooted in an ancient myth that, following the creation of the world by Osiris and Isis, elevated the sexes to equal power. However, it's important to recognize that the literature written by predominantly male scribes significantly influenced how women were perceived. The description of the woman as milky-breasted doesn't imply a Caucasian ethnicity but rather lighter skin tone due to reduced exposure to the sun. In Egyptian society, women typically managed household affairs, and upper-class women especially avoided tanning as it was associated with lower-class outdoor labor. This distinct social stratification did not hinder the experience of love, devotion, and affection for individuals across the spectrum. The emotions and experiences related to love, sex, and marriage were shared by both lower and upper classes, echoing the universal human emotions that persist across time. Tutankhamun, the renowned pharaoh of ancient Egypt, is perhaps best remembered not for his achievements but for the astonishing discovery of his intact tomb in 1922 CE. During his reign, 1336 to 1327 BCE, Tutankhamun aimed to restore Egypt's stability and religious practices after the controversial rule of his father, Akhenaten, 1353 to 1336 BCE. This period is also notable for the depiction of Tutankhamun and his half-sister/wife, Ankhsenamun, circa 1350 BCE, which offers captivating insights into romantic love in ancient Egypt. The images portraying Tutankhamun and Ankhsenamun together are captivating due to their proximity, gestures, and expressions. They reflect a sense of deep devotion between the couple. Egyptologist Zahi Hawass highlights this, stating, "We can feel the love between them as we see the queen standing in front of her husband giving him flowers and accompanying him while he was hunting." Despite these portrayals being stylized, as was common in Egyptian art, they convey a profound level of affection. This sentiment of devotion is also found in other artistic depictions and inscriptions throughout Egypt's history. Inscriptions from the 21st dynasty reveal the tenderness between couples. One husband's words about his wife resonate with timeless emotion. "Whoa, you have been taken from me, the one with the beautiful face. There was none like her and I found nothing bad about you." In many inscriptions, men and women are portrayed as equal partners and friends within relationships. While men held the role of household leaders and were expected to be obeyed, women were respected as collaborative partners with their husbands rather than being subordinate. The sexual aspect of life in ancient Egypt was embraced without the taboos or stigma that might be seen today. Sexuality was considered a natural part of earthly existence. Consent between unmarried adults was not stigmatized, and there was no social shame attached to having illegitimate children. However, once a woman married, fidelity to her husband was expected to ensure the legitimacy of the offspring and inheritance. Marital unfaithfulness could lead to private consequences such as divorce, beatings, or even death. It's important to note that government intervention occasionally occurred in cases of adultery, often resulting in the death penalty for women. In one harrowing case, a woman was tied to a stake outside her home, which was considered defiled, and she was burned to death. While such cases were not the norm, they demonstrate that societal values around fidelity were strongly upheld in ancient Egypt. In summary, the depiction of Tutankhamun and Ankhsenamun's relationship offers a glimpse into the expression of romantic love in ancient Egypt. Artistic portrayals and inscriptions from this time indicate a deep bond between couples, rooted in respect and partnership. The acceptance of sexuality within marriage underscored the society's more relaxed attitudes toward relationships, while maintaining strict standards of fidelity for the sake of lineage and inheritance. In ancient Egyptian literature, stories and cautionary tales about unfaithful women were quite common. One well-known tale is that of Anpu and Bata, also called the Tale of Two Brothers. This story centers around Anpu's wife attempting to seduce his younger brother Bata. Bata rejects her advances, but when she falsely accuses Bata of trying to rape her, it sparks a chain of events that shatters their relationship and leads to tragedy. This theme of infidelity causing disruption and harm was a prevalent one, reflecting the Egyptians' emphasis on social harmony. Another prominent tale involving gods is the story of Osiris and Isis. In this story, Osiris is murdered by his brother Set. The chaos that follows Osiris's murder, stemming from Nephthys, Set's wife, disguising herself as Isis to seduce Osiris, emphasizes the consequences of infidelity. Osiris is portrayed as innocent in this story, as he believed he was with his wife. The blame for the transgression is placed on Nephthys, the other woman. Beyond these stories promoting fidelity, ancient Egyptian literature contains limited information about sexual practices. This scarcity of details is often interpreted by scholars as a sign that sex wasn't a highly emphasized topic in Egyptian culture. There are no records of prohibitions against homosexuality, and some historical evidence even suggests that the long-reigning ruler Pepi II might have been homosexual. Unmarried women had the freedom to engage in sexual relationships with whomever they chose. The Ebers Medical Papyrus, dating back to around 1542 BCE, contains contraceptive recipes. Abortions were also available and didn't carry the same social stigma as they might in later societies. Interestingly, there's no ancient Egyptian word for virgin, implying that one's sexual experience wasn't considered of paramount importance. Prostitution wasn't a significant concern in ancient Egypt, particularly before the late period. No brothels have been identified, and there's minimal mention of prostitution in written works or legal documents. In summary, while stories of unfaithfulness served as cautionary tales, the ancient Egyptians seem to have had a relatively relaxed attitude toward sex, with freedom for unmarried women, evidence of contraception and abortion practices, and a lack of strong prohibitions against homosexuality or premarital relationships. In ancient Egyptian society, the interpretation of certain texts remains uncertain, such as the famous Papyrus Turin 55001, which describes various erotic encounters. It's debated whether this text depicts interactions between a prostitute and a client or is intended as a humorous farce. More significant than sexual prowess, however, was the potential for a woman to lead a man astray from his family. The Council of the Scribe Ani advises caution in dealing with unfamiliar women. Be cautious of unfamiliar women, those not known in their town. Don't gaze at them as they pass by, and don't engage in relations with them. A woman away from her husband is like deep water with an unpredictable course. Given the Egyptians' value for social harmony, it's logical that they emphasize stories promoting domestic peace. Interestingly, there are no comparable stories where men are portrayed as the cause of trouble. Monogamy was upheld as an important virtue, even within stories involving gods. Male deities typically had only one female partner, while the king and affluent men were permitted multiple wives as long as they could provide for them. This likely influenced the perception of male infidelity. Still, the ideal relationship in ancient Egypt was one where a couple remained faithful to each other and raised children together. This dedication to monogamy and family values was a hallmark of ancient Egyptian society. In ancient Egypt, marriage was unlike modern ceremonies. When a woman entered a man's house with agreed-upon goods, they were considered married. Parents often arranged marriages, with an agreed bride price and reciprocal gifts from the groom's family to the bride's. Prenuptial agreements were common, and possessions the bride brought to the marriage remained hers. Marriage's purpose was to have children, but couples were also expected to love and respect each other. Egyptologist Barbara Watterson explains that taking a wife meant setting up a household. Husbands were expected to love and care for their wives, as Sage Tahotep's advice suggests. Love your wife, feed her, clothe her, and make her happy, but don't let her gain the upper hand. Another sage, Ani, offered wisdom on a happy marriage. Don't boss your wife in her own house when you know she is efficient. Marriage settlements were drafted by the groom and the bride's father, signed before witnesses, and then the couple was considered married. Children belonged to the mother, and in case of divorce, they stayed with her. Despite warnings about unfaithful women, Egyptian women had significant freedom in marriage. Historian Don Nardo notes that in ancient societies, women were often seen as property, but in Egypt, many couples seem to have enjoyed positive, loving relationships. Tomb paintings and inscriptions depict husbands and wives eating, dancing, and working together. While royal families sometimes practiced sibling marriage, this was discouraged for commoners. Marriage was arranged for mutual benefit, hoping love would develop over time. Nardo explains that a man might find happiness in knowing his wife was content and managing the home well. The stable family was the foundation of society. Although royals could marry freely, commoners were encouraged to marry outside their bloodlines. Girls could marry at 12, boys at 15. but the average was around 14 for girls and 18 to 20 for boys. Boys learned their father's trade, while girls learned to manage the home and care for family members and pets. Historian Charles Freeman emphasizes the family's importance in Egyptian society. Art showed couples content and caring for each other. Idealized care of the young and old was celebrated. These marriages didn't always last, and divorce was an option when relationships didn't work out. In ancient Egypt, ending a marriage was as simple as its beginning. When one or both spouses wished to divorce, they divided possessions based on the prenuptial agreement, created a new agreement, and the marriage was dissolved. Historian Margaret Bunson points out that this process required an understanding of property rights and the economic well-being of the ex-wife. In essence, all possessions, including those the husband considered his own, were divided according to the original agreement. Anything the wife brought into the marriage could be taken with her when it ended. However, a charge of infidelity, backed by substantial evidence, could strip a woman of her rights in divorce. During the New Kingdom and late period, divorce procedures became more intricate as central authorities became more involved. Documents from this period resemble true marriage contracts. In the event of divorce, any dowry given by the groom during marriage returned to the wife for her support or as a single payment. Alimony payments also existed, where the husband would provide his ex-wife with a regular stipend until she remarried, even if they had no children together. This process emphasized fairness and economic stability for both parties involved in the dissolution of the marriage. Marriage in ancient Egypt was viewed as a lifelong commitment that extended even beyond death. Given the relatively short lifespans and high mortality rates of the time, couples cherished the idea of reuniting in the afterlife. Although many men and women passed away at young ages, often due to childbirth, the concept of eternal togetherness provided comfort in the face of loss. The imagery in tomb paintings and inscriptions depicted couples in the field of reeds, a heavenly afterlife realm, engaging in the same activities they enjoyed on earth. The Egyptian belief in eternal life shaped their approach to marriage. They aimed to make their present lives as joyful as possible, knowing that these pleasures could be carried into eternity. Unlike some modern concepts of an otherworldly paradise, the Egyptians perceived the afterlife as a continuation of their earthly existence. Following death, individuals face judgment before Osiris, and if deemed deserving, enter the field of reeds. This paradise mirrored their lives on earth, complete with homes, beloved pets, and, most importantly, reunited loved ones, including spouses. However, if one failed to treat their spouse well in life, this reunion might be jeopardized. Egyptian society emphasized the importance of treating one another with respect and kindness, not only for a harmonious life on earth but also for a harmonious afterlife. Instances of curses or ill fortunes believed to be caused by vengeful spouses in the afterlife led to interventions by priests. These interventions ranged from explanations and pleas to atonement for misdeeds. The resolution of such conflicts ensured the tranquility of both the living and the deceased. In cases where conflicts couldn't be resolved, erasing all memory of the individual became an option. This meant destroying all images of the person, as their spirit could only thrive if remembered by the living. Egypt's grand monuments and temples, built to be remembered through time, played a significant role in ensuring the continuation of memory. Without images or names, a soul's existence could be jeopardized. To avoid such conflicts and ensure a peaceful afterlife, Egyptians strove for a life marked by harmony and kindness. Eternal harmony was a reward for those who practiced love, empathy, and goodwill. This underlying belief underscored the significance of love, sex, and marriage, and the value of nurturing these bonds on earth as a promise for an eternity of joy.